I had been seeing this girl for about a month. Her name was Jenna. We met on a dating app and things seemed pretty normal at first. Our first date was at a casual cafe and our second was a weekend hike. She seemed nice enough, though my friends thought she was a little reserved, quiet even. They didn't seem to think much of her, but didn't want to outright say anything. One day, Jenna invited me to a party. She said it was a small gathering with some of her old college friends. I thought it'd be a good chance to meet her circle, so I agreed to go. She mentioned the party was being held at a house in a nice neighborhood, but she didn't tell me much about the host, just that they were a former college buddy who had a bit of money. I showed up a little early, as I always do, and when I pulled up, the house looked massive. It had that type of manicured, upscale charm, but there weren't any cars parked outside. I thought maybe everyone was just inside, but it seemed odd for a party that was supposed to be happening soon. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being overly suspicious. When I walked inside, the atmosphere felt off right away. The people were older than I expected, way older. I thought Jenna told me this group was from her college days, but most of them looked to be in their late 30s, maybe even early 40s. Everyone turned to look at me the second I walked in, like they were waiting for me. Some of them greeted Jenna warmly, then their attention shifted to me, sizing me up in a way that felt more like an interrogation than a casual introduction. I tried to play it cool, but the questions came quick. What do you do for work? Where do you live? How long have you been with Jenna? It was strange, too personal, too quickly. Jenna noticed me getting uncomfortable and pulled me away to another room, but it didn't help. It was the same weird energy everywhere. No one was talking, no music, just the sounds of clinking glasses and awkward small talk. I asked Jenna if she was sure this was a college reunion, and she gave me an odd answer, laughing it off, saying, "Some of them just look older than they are." I wasn't convinced, but didn't want to make a scene. I excused myself and went to find the bathroom, hoping to just take a break and reset. I walked down the long hallway, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house, until I reached the bathroom. I locked the door and sat for a minute, just to breathe. I texted my friends, telling them how weird everything felt and asking how I could get out of there. I didn't hear back, but at that point, I wasn't sure I even cared. Then, someone knocked on the bathroom door. I didn't want to deal with anyone, but I opened it anyway. It was a guy, probably in his 30s. He had a strange look in his eyes, almost a mix of pity and warning. He leaned in and whispered, "You need to leave. She's not who she says she is." I froze, my heart racing. I asked, "What do you mean?" But he just shook his head. "She's lying to you about everything. This isn't a college reunion." Then he added, "Trust me. Get out while you still can." I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted answers, but he just stepped past me, entering the bathroom without saying another word. I stood there for a second, too stunned to move. Something wasn't right. I walked out of the bathroom and immediately headed for the front door. The whole time, I felt eyes on me, and it was like I couldn't get out fast enough. I didn't care if they saw me leaving. I just needed to get away from that house. I got to my car, started it, and drove off. As I pulled away, I got a text from Jenna asking where I went. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Once I got home, I looked up her number. It wasn't linked to the name Jenna. It was a different name entirely, Lily Foster. I also realized I'd never seen her leave the house on our dates. She was always waiting on the sidewalk as if she was already there. I blocked the number immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something that was never supposed to happen. I didn't tell anyone about it at first. I figured they'd just brush it off as an overreaction, but they all said the same thing. "It sounds like you were in one of those horror movies." I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. I was around 9 years old when this happened. My parents were a little older when they had me, so my two older siblings were already in their 20s by the time I came around. One night, my parents were out, and I was alone at the house. I remember it was pretty late, and I was already tucked in bed trying to fall asleep. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the wooden floors settling. I suddenly woke up to a faint noise from downstairs. It sounded like muffled talking, but I couldn't make out what it was. I sat up in bed, confused. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it or if my parents had come home early, but I wasn't used to hearing voices at that hour, so I carefully got out of bed and tiptoed to the top of the stairs. I called out softly, "Mom? Dad?" But there was no answer. The only thing I heard was the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the hallway. I figured they must have come home, so I went back to bed. But then, a few minutes later, I heard the front door slam shut. I was certain they had just come inside, but then silence. Complete silence. No talking. No movement. I listened hard, but nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to brush it off, but then the sound started again. Footsteps. Soft at first, but they grew louder. It was almost like someone was walking through the house, but not saying a word. I could hear drawers opening and closing, and even the fridge door creaking open. It sounded like someone was rummaging through the kitchen. I thought it was probably my older brother, Jason, who sometimes came home late after hanging out with friends. He had a habit of raiding the fridge at odd hours. The footsteps got closer, moving up the stairs, and my heart started to race. I froze, holding my breath as the footsteps grew louder. Whoever it was, they were coming straight for my room. I didn't dare move. I stayed perfectly still, staring at the shadowed crack under my door. And then the door slowly creaked open. I couldn't see who it was, just a dark shape in the doorway. I whispered, "Mom? Dad?" But there was no response. I could feel my pulse racing. The shape didn't say anything. It just stood there for what felt like forever before it quietly shut the door again. The footsteps retreated back down the stairs, and I stayed completely still, my mind racing. Maybe it was my dad just checking on me, but something felt off about it. I couldn't explain it. A few minutes passed, and I couldn't take it anymore. I crept out of bed and decided to check for myself. I walked down the stairs in the dark, my heart thumping in my chest. As I reached the kitchen, I froze. There was a tall figure standing in the middle of the room, just standing there, still as a statue. I whispered, "Dad?" But the voice that answered wasn't my father's. It was deep, unfamiliar, and sent a chill through my whole body. "Go back upstairs." I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran back up the stairs, my legs trembling. I locked the door behind me and crawled under the covers, shaking. My mind was spinning. Was it a burglar? A stranger? The thought of it being someone who had broken in didn't fully sink in until much later. When my parents came home hours later, I ran to them, telling them everything. They were shocked, and my mom immediately started freaking out. My dad searched the entire house, gun in hand, and called the police. Nothing seemed to be missing, and there was no sign of forced entry. The only thing that was clear was that someone had been in the house while I was alone. Someone who didn't belong there. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that whoever it was, they never meant to harm me. But that doesn't make it any less terrifying. It was the last day of school, and I was in 4th grade. The school year was ending, and we were all excited for the summer. My mom always picked me up on the last day of school, and I was looking forward to a fun afternoon with my best friend, Lucas. Lucas and I had been best friends since kindergarten, but this year we weren't in the same class. We had planned to hang out all day to celebrate. After the bell rang, we lined up with our classmates and walked out of the school building, waiting by the exit for our parents to pick us up. I looked around, trying to spot my mom in the crowd of parents. But then I heard someone call my name. I turned around to see a man waving at me. He smiled and said, "Hey, I'm Lucas's uncle. I'm here to pick you up today." I was confused. Lucas's uncle? I hadn't met him before, but he seemed friendly enough. I looked over at my teacher, Mrs. Green, and told her what he had said. She gave me a strange look, but she let me go. I figured it must be fine. After all, Lucas's family was nice, and maybe he had just come to pick me up since my mom was running late. The man walked briskly ahead of me, moving so fast I could barely keep up. He kept talking non-stop, asking me questions about school, about my favorite games, and about my family. I tried to answer, but something felt off. I noticed that his speech was a little jittery, like he was nervous or trying to hide something. As we walked farther away from the school, I started to feel uneasy. He led me to a car that was parked a few blocks away. It was a dark blue sedan, and it looked worn out, like it had seen better days. I got in the car, still unsure of what was happening. It was only then that I realized, where was Lucas? Why wasn't he with us? I asked the man where Lucas was, and he said, "Oh, he's already at his house. Don't worry, we'll get you there soon." That didn't make sense. If Lucas had already gone home, why wasn't he walking with me? I didn't say anything, though, just sat quietly in the back seat. We drove for a while. Normally, it would take only 5 minutes to get to my house from school, but the drive was longer. I didn't recognize any of the streets we were passing. The houses looked unfamiliar, and the air inside the car felt thick and uncomfortable. I tried to push my growing panic aside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Eventually, the car pulled up to a house. It was a run-down old house, nothing like Lucas's family's home. The man quickly got out and came around to open my door. "Come on inside," he said with a forced smile. I didn't want to go, but my legs felt heavy, like they couldn't move. Inside, the house was dark. The curtains were shut, and there was only one dim light hanging from the ceiling. I was starting to feel trapped. The man led me through the house, and I started to realize just how empty it seemed. No one else was around. "Where's Lucas?" I asked, my voice shaking. The man's smile faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, he's downstairs playing games. Wait here. I'll go get him." He disappeared down the stairs, and I stood frozen in the living room. That's when I heard it. My heart started pounding, and my hands went clammy. I was alone. I couldn't even hear the man anymore. Desperate, I ran into the kitchen and grabbed the phone that was hanging on the wall. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, whispering into the receiver, "Please help me, I've been kidnapped." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone, slipped it under a towel on the counter, and ran back to the living room. The man was coming back up the stairs. He called my name, but I didn't answer. I could hear him getting closer, so I ran toward the front door, but it was locked. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang on the door. Someone was outside, banging and shouting. I didn't know who it was, but it was a sound I would never forget. The man froze. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could see the panic in them. In that moment, I knew that help had come. I screamed for help, hoping they could hear me, and then the door was kicked open. Police officers rushed in and pulled me outside. I was shaking with fear, but they reassured me. The man who had taken me was arrested right there. It turned out that he wasn't even really Lucas's uncle. He was someone who had been watching us for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to take me. I never saw him again, and I don't think I'll ever forget the feeling of fear and confusion I had that day. I learned a lesson the hard way, but I was lucky. I got out, and I'll never stop being grateful that I did.